Welcome to Explore TV. In this captivating journey through history, we dive deep into the life and legacy of one of Russia's most transformative rulers, Peter the Great. From his rise to power at a young age to his bold reforms that shaped Russia into an empire, Peter's story is one of ambition, innovation, and unyielding determination. At Explore TV, we bring you closer to the fascinating figures, events, and legacies that shape the course of history. Today, we uncover how Peter the Great revolutionized Russia, built a modern empire, and left behind a legacy that continues to influence the world. Join us as we unravel the remarkable life of Peter the Great, his remarkable achievements, and the indelible mark he left on history. Imagine being just 10 years old, and the weight of an entire empire suddenly falls onto your small shoulders. This was the world of Peter Alexeyevich, better known as Peter I the Great, the last Tsar and the first Emperor of Russia from the powerful Romanov dynasty. Born into a family of rulers, the son, the godson, the brother of Tsars, Peter's destiny was never ordinary. Yet, few could have predicted just how much he would change the course of Russian history. At first, Peter shared the throne with his half-brother, Ivan V, while his strong-willed sister, Sofia Alexeyevna, ruled as regent. But Peter was no ordinary boy. By the time he turned 17, he seized full control, sweeping aside rivals and stepping into the role of Russia's sole ruler. And then he transformed the nation forever. Determined to break Russia's isolation, Peter tore down the old ways and cut a window to Europe, a phrase every Russian schoolchild knows by heart. He modernized the army, built a navy from scratch, reformed the government, and founded a new capital city, Saint Petersburg, right on the Baltic coast, facing the west. Peter didn't just rule Russia, he rebuilt it, reshaping a medieval kingdom into a rising European power. Through war, reform, and unstoppable willpower, he forged the mighty Russian Empire, and crowned himself not merely a Tsar, but an emperor. From boy prince to visionary emperor, Peter the Great's journey is one of ambition, courage, and transformation, a story that still echoes across history. In the bustling corridors of the Russian royal court, a baby's cry pierced the air on May 30th, 1672. His name was Peter, an unusual name for his noble bloodlines, one that left historians puzzled for centuries. Born to Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich, known as the Quietist, and his energetic second wife Natalia Narishkina, Peter was the 14th child for his father, but the very first for his mother. Little did anyone know this child would one day change the course of an empire. When Tsar Alexei died in 1676, Peter was just 4 years old. His elder brother Fyodor III took the throne, a sickly ruler whose time was short. As a young boy, Peter was named godfather and protector to the next heir, a role he took seriously even at his tender age. But Peter's education, it was far from the grand lessons you might expect for a future emperor. Orthodox priests, wary of Western ideas, dominated the court. Latin, the language of science and diplomacy, was banned. Instead, Peter spent long hours reading religious texts, learning to read and write, but never mastering spelling, a struggle that followed him for life. When Fyodor III died after only 6 years on the throne, the power struggle began. Technically, the crown should have passed to the frail Ivan V, but the Narishkin family, Peter's mother's clan, had other plans. They pushed to crown the lively, healthy Peter instead. They underestimated the rage of the Miloslavsky family, Ivan's supporters. In 1682, the palace erupted into chaos. The Streltsy, the feared musketeers of Moscow, rose up in revolt demanding justice. Blood was spilled in the corridors of power. To calm the storm, a rare solution was forged. Russia would have two rulers, Peter I and Ivan V, sitting side by side on a specially built double throne. A double crown for a double kingdom, and that legendary throne still stands today in the armory chamber. As the political fires burned around him, young Peter found an escape. In the fields beyond Moscow, he gathered real boys, dressed them in miniature military uniforms, and led them in mock battles with toy cannons and wooden swords. These were not simple games, they were the first drills of a military genius in the making. From the beginning, Peter wasn't just playing with toys, he was preparing to build an empire. The young Tsar Peter Alexeyevich spent much of his early life under the watchful eyes of others, first his fierce older sister Sophia, then his mother, Natalia Kirillovna, and the powerful Narishkin family. Meanwhile, his co-ruler, Ivan Fief, found the burdens of leadership too heavy to bear. Without resistance, Ivan let power slip quietly into Peter's eager hands. And when Peter's mother passed away, the last chains of family influence fell away. At last, Peter stood alone, Russia's true sovereign, but the boy who once played with toy armies was now ready for real battles, his first challenge, the Ottoman Empire. Peter led a bold campaign to seize the strategic fortress of Azov, a gateway to the south. Victory was his, yet he knew better than to celebrate too soon. Without a strong navy, Russia's hold would always be fragile. So, Peter dreamed bigger. He launched a shipbuilding revolution, unlike anything Russia had ever seen. Young nobles were dispatched to Europe to master the art of the seas, and Peter himself didn't just sit on a throne. He worked shoulder to shoulder with his men, hammering, sawing, and learning to build ships with his own hands. One of his proudest creations, a vessel called the Peter and Paul. But as Peter shaped his empire, danger brewed at home. His own first wife, consumed by ambition, plotted a palace coup. The Streltsy, the same fearsome musketeers who had once crowned him, now threatened to tear him down. Peter crushed the revolt without mercy. With his domestic enemies silenced, Peter set his sights on a new prize: Sweden. After brutal battles along the Neva River, Russian forces captured the vital fortresses of Nyenskans and Noteberg. On these blood-soaked lands, Peter envisioned something extraordinary, a city unlike any Russia had ever seen, a modern marvel, a European masterpiece, Saint Petersburg. To defend it, Peter fortified Kotlin Island, laying the groundwork for what would become the mighty naval port of Kronstadt. Russia's first great fleet had been born. From the muddy battlefields to the stormy seas, Peter the Great wasn't just building ships or cities. He was forging a new Russia with fire, wood, and steel. Victory after victory, Peter the Great was carving a new destiny for Russia. Through bloodshed and bold ambition, he secured what had long been a dream, Russia's window to Europe. By gaining precious access to the Baltic Sea, Peter didn't just redraw the maps. He shifted the balance of power. The eastern Baltic states fell under Russian control, and Europe could no longer ignore the growing giant to the east. Then came 1709, the Battle of Poltava. It would become one of the most legendary battles in Russian history. While generals cowered in their tents and kings plotted from afar, Peter Alexeyevich fought shoulder to shoulder with his men. In the chaos of musket fire and clashing steel, a bullet tore through the air, striking Peter's own hat, missing his skull by inches. He should have died that day, but fate had grander plans. The Swedes, under the once mighty Charles XIV, suffered a crushing defeat. Broken and desperate, Charles fled to Bendary, then Ottoman territory, now part of Moldova, where he gathered a fragile coalition of Zaporozhian Cossacks and Crimean Tatars, plotting revenge against Russia. Peter's troubles were far from over. Tensions with the Turks boiled over into a dangerous new chapter. In the tangled forests and muddy battlefields near the Russian-Moldavian border, Peter's forces were surrounded, staring death in the face. With no other choice, Peter negotiated a bitter peace. Russia would surrender the fortress of Azov and retreat from the sea. A painful blow, but Peter knew when to bend so he could survive to strike again. And he wasn't finished yet. While war raged in the west and south, Peter pushed Russia's borders eastward, planting cities like Omsk, Semipalatinsk, and Ust-Kamenogorsk. Even the far-flung wilderness of Kamchatka fell under Russian dominion. Dreams of reaching North America and India danced in Peter's mind, grand visions that would remain just out of reach. Still, his ambitions scorched new marks across the map. In the blazing Caspian campaign, Peter marched into Persia, seizing powerful strongholds like Baku, Derbent, Astrabad, and Resht, securing Russia's influence deep into the Caucasus. Yet history would not always favor his conquests. After Peter's death, the new rulers, seeing these territories as drains on the treasury, let many of them slip away without a fight. But Peter the Great had already left his mark, not just on the soil of Russia, but on the soul of a nation determined to stand among empires. Once a boy who played with toy soldiers in Moscow's dusty courtyards, Peter Alexeyevich had grown into a ruler determined to change the very soul of his nation. And change it he did, by fire, by hammer, and by sheer force of will. As Russia's territory expanded under his reign, Peter envisioned something greater, not just a kingdom, but an empire. In 1721, the dream became reality when Peter was officially crowned the first emperor of Russia. But Peter didn't stop at titles. He waged a new kind of war, not on enemies from without, but on traditions from within. His mission: to drag Russia kicking and screaming into the modern world. The army came first, stronger, faster, unstoppable. Then the church itself fell under the sovereign's hand, stripped of its autonomy. Industry and trade flourished like never before, fueled by Peter's bold vision. No corner of Russian life was safe from his reforms. The boyars, those proud old nobles, watched in horror as Peter ordered their beards shaven and their robes replaced with sharp European fashions. For Peter, appearances mattered. Russia had to look like a European power to become one. He knew that true power would come from the mind. Across the empire, he opened schools, invited foreign teachers, and translated hundreds of classic works into Russian. Doctors, engineers, sailors, artillerymen, an army of knowledge was being forged alongside the army of men. Even the sons of humble soldiers could now dream of a life beyond the battlefield. A new Russia was being born. Peter introduced a national newspaper, a gymnasium, and even rewrote time itself, introducing a new calendar. He lifted women's status by banning forced marriages and changed how people spoke, insisting they use first names and patronymics instead of bowing and scraping. Russia's nobility was being remade, but the gap between rich and poor grew wider than ever. Not everyone embraced Peter's whirlwind of reforms. Among the common folk, resentment festered, and Peter, ever the strategist, crushed dissent with iron fists. The construction of Saint Petersburg, his gleaming window to Europe, was built upon the backs of countless laborers who suffered under brutal conditions. Those who fled were dragged back, and their families punished in their place. To root out rebellion, Peter established the secret chancellery, a fearsome body born from the old Preobrazhensky Prikaz. Spies prowled the streets. Accusations could lead to death. Records were banned in closed spaces. Silence was suspicious. Peter believed fear was a necessary price for progress. Across Europe, whispers of Russia's transformation stirred curiosity and awe. Even the great Voltaire sought to capture Peter's legend, gathering demographic reports showing a Russia swelling with people. Millions of peasants, nobles, clergy, and officials, all under the iron hand of one man. Peter the Great had reshaped a kingdom into an empire and etched his name in history as the ruler who remade Russia at any cost. In the autumn chill of 1702, Peter the Great stood before his court and issued a bold new decree: religious tolerance for all, at least almost all. There was one group Peter refused to embrace: the old believers, the staunch traditionalists who clung fiercely to the ways of old Russia. On the surface, he offered them a compromise, semi-legal status, but hidden beneath this offer was a heavy price: double taxes, double duties, a burden so crushing it was clear. Tolerance was merely a word, not a promise. Those who dared to resist, who refused to pay the Tsar's inflated tolls, found themselves facing harsh fates, ruinous fines, brutal punishments, even exile to back-breaking labor camps. And for the priests who dared to lead secret services, the punishment was even darker: death. Peter's enforcers scoured the lands, smashing hermitages, torching hidden chapels, and hunting the old believer priests like criminals. Captured priests endured agonies, whippings that tore flesh from bone, cruel mutilations meant to break their spirit. Some, shattered by pain and despair, eventually bowed to the official church, but most they stood unbroken, clinging to their ancient faith even as the empire turned against them. To the old believers, there was no doubt. Peter Alexievich was not a modernizer. He was the Antichrist incarnate. His crowning as emperor, they whispered, was proof that sovereign authority had been corrupted by the Roman Catholic Church. His new Western calendar, a betrayal of the holy traditions. His population census, a mark of the beast itself. In 1722, deep in the frozen wilds of Siberia, in the city of Tara, a desperate flame of rebellion was lit. The old believers, worn but defiant, rose up against the emperor's iron rule. But Peter's armies moved swiftly and without mercy. The uprising was crushed, drowned in blood and silence. And so the old believers, scattered but unbowed, carried their ancient faith into the shadows, where it would smolder for centuries, a silent rebellion against the empire that sought to erase them. Before he became the towering force that reshaped an empire, young Peter Alexeyevich found himself enchanted by an unlikely world, the bustling German quarter of Moscow. It was here, among the smoky taverns and swirling dances of Western foreigners, that Peter first tasted European culture and first love. Her name was Anna Mons, a captivating woman who bewitched the young Tsar-to-be. But at court she was met with scorn and cruel whispers, mockingly dubbed the Monsika and the Kukuiskaya queen. When Peter's strict mother discovered the affair, she acted swiftly, arranging a political marriage to the noble Evdokia Lopukina. But love cannot be forced. Peter loathed the union. He fled from his wife's presence, visiting her only when necessary to keep up appearances. Though they had 3 sons, tragedy stalked the family. 2 died young, leaving only the eldest, Alexei, to carry the royal bloodline. Behind palace walls, whispers of rebellion grew. In 1698, Evdokia dared to challenge Peter's rule, conspiring to place her son on the throne. Her defiance earned her a swift and brutal fate, exiled to a lonely monastery. Meanwhile, the wounded Alexei, harboring a burning hatred for his father, fled abroad, gathering allies for revenge. But the empire had long arms. In 1717, the secret chancellery's agents seized Alexei, dragging him back to the grim cells of the Peter and Paul fortress. There, under mysterious and shadowy circumstances, the young Tsarevich met his end before his execution could even be pronounced. Peter's heart found new warmth elsewhere. During his conquest of the Swedish city of Marienburg, he captured a young woman, Marta Skavronskaya. From captive to consort, Marta bore him 11 children, though heartbreak shadowed them, as only a few survived. After her baptism into Orthodoxy and their marriage in 1712, she became Ekaterina Alexeyevna, later known to history as Empress Catherine I. Only Ekaterina seemed able to tame Peter's volcanic temper, standing beside him on bloody battlefields and in royal courts alike. Yet even the great love between them could not halt Peter's restless spirit. Near the end of his life, he was famously enamored with Maria Kantemir, a noble princess whose beauty captivated the aging emperor, and through it all, Peter the Great was impossible to miss. Standing at an incredible 203 centimeters, nearly 7 feet, he towered over his subjects, his massive figure cutting through crowds like a ship through stormy seas. In every way, he was larger than life, in love, in ambition, and in legacy. Not all legends are bathed in glory. Behind the towering figure of Peter Alexeyevich, the brilliant reformer of Russia, lurked a man of fiery passion and terrifying fury. From a young age, Peter's sharp mind and quick wit set him apart, but so did his unpredictable temper. One moment he could be warm and affectionate, the next, consumed by explosive rage that bordered on cruelty. Peter loved a spectacle. He revelled in wild, raucous gatherings with his friends, where laughter and mockery filled the air. At these infamous feasts, the proud boyars, the old Russian nobility, became the butt of the young Tsar's cruel jokes. Peter would seize them, drag them through chairs, rip away their traditional garments, and force them to flee, naked and humiliated, through the palace halls. Mocking tradition became an art form for Peter. He even created a club dedicated to it, the outrageous, most joking, most drunken and extravagant council. Here no custom was sacred, no symbol of the old ways was spared from laughter and scorn. But behind the humour lurked a darker side. After crushing the Streltsy revolt, Peter stepped beyond the throne, taking justice into his own bloody hands. He personally oversaw the executions, transforming from emperor to executioner. One chilling account, recorded by Danish diplomat Jos Juul, captured a particularly horrifying scene. Returning triumphant to Moscow after the Battle of Poltava, Peter's demeanour was strange. His head twisted sharply, his face twitched uncontrollably, a man visibly unhinged. When he spotted a soldier accused of betrayal, Peter's fury boiled over. Before anyone could intervene, he charged the man with his horse, trampling him under hoof. And then, eyes wild, hands shaking, Peter drew his sword and hacked the soldier apart in a frenzy, right there in the open square. This was no ordinary king. This was a man of unstoppable ambition and unrestrained darkness. Peter the Great, both the architect of a modern empire and a ruler who ruled not just with wisdom, but with terror. Even the mightiest rulers cannot outrun fate. Though Peter Alexeyevich, the towering giant of Russia, was blessed with a strong constitution unlike his frail half-brothers, he carried a hidden burden all his life, crippling headaches that haunted him like a shadow. But it was not the headaches that would bring down the Tsar who had built an empire. It was something far more insidious. In the final months of 1724, a painful ordeal began to unfold. Peter, ever the soldier at heart, had insisted on helping his men haul a stranded ship back to safety, shoulders deep in freezing water, pulling alongside common soldiers. It was an act of courage, of solidarity, but it came at a terrible cost. The effort triggered a brutal attack of kidney stones, a condition he stubbornly tried to ignore. Days turned into weeks. The pain gnawed at him, unrelenting, yet Peter, the unbreakable Tsar, refused to yield. He brushed aside concerns, convinced his will alone could conquer the agony racking his body. By the winter of 1725, even Peter's iron will could no longer hold back the inevitable. Within the walls of the newly built Winter Palace, the emperor lay stricken. He was so weak he could no longer even cry out. Only a faint, desperate signal to those around him revealed the depth of his suffering. The court watched in helpless horror as the life drained from their mighty sovereign. On a bitter winter's day, after hours of excruciating silence, Peter the Great, the founder of modern Russia, took his final breath. At first, his death was blamed on pneumonia, but an autopsy uncovered the grim truth. A raging infection of the gallbladder had progressed to gangrene, silently killing him from within. In a solemn ceremony, the body of Russia's first emperor was laid to rest in the cathedral of the Peter and Paul fortress in Saint Petersburg, the city he had dreamed into existence. And so ended the reign of one of history's most formidable rulers. The torch passed to his loyal wife, Empress Catherine I, who stepped forward into the heavy shadow of the man who had reshaped a nation. When Peter Alexeyevich drew his last breath, the story of his life did not end. It only grew larger. Despite his humble nature and complete indifference to personal fame during his lifetime, a wave of admiration for the great Tsar swept across Russia almost immediately after his passing. And that admiration, deep, fierce, and enduring, would survive the rise and fall of dynasties, revolutions, and empires. Cities sprang up bearing his name: Petrograd, Petrozavodsk, Petrokrepost, and Petrodvorets. Vast landscapes, from Peter the Great Bay to the distant Peter V Island, were christened in his honor, marking the map of Russia with the legacy of a man who had reshaped the nation. Monuments to the reformer rose across the empire, each more magnificent than the last. The most iconic of all, the mighty bronze horseman, stands to this day in Senate Square, an eternal sentinel overlooking the northern capital. A symbol not just of a ruler, but of a dream that catapulted Russia into the modern world. Peter's legend was immortalized by the greatest artists and writers of the land. Mikhail Lomonosov penned the epic Peter the Great. Alexander Pushkin, the soul of Russian literature, breathed life into the emperor's image through works like The Negro of Peter the Great and The History of Peter the. And in the flickering glow of cinema screens in the 20th century, Peter's story lived again. He strode through more than 20 historical films, from Peter the Great to The Tobacco Captain, from the lively The Tale of How Tsar Peter Married Off His Moor to the stirring saga of young Russia and the intricate drama of secrets of palace revolutions. The man who once marched with carpenters and sailors, who battled kings and rewrote the destiny of a nation, had become something greater, a living legend, etched forever in the memory of a people. Thank you for watching. The story of Peter the Great is one of vision, determination, and monumental change. His reign not only shaped Russia's destiny, but also left an enduring legacy that still resonates today. If you enjoyed this journey into history, don't forget to subscribe to Explore TV for more in-depth explorations of fascinating historical figures, events, and untold stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new episode, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep exploring with Explore TV.